Good. So welcome. As I say, a very familiar group. It's nice to have some old friends here. Some of you who know each other. I think we know all of you. Some of you may not have met Mags. Mags is part of our core team, pivotal to us organising these sorts of things. So Mags will be keeping an eye on the chat as we go through the session, and picking up any questions and popping in one or two resources as we go along. But I think other than that, David and myself will be leading the session today. So we've been talking about the weather, which is interesting. It was a good cue. Thanks, Helen. Before I move on to the next slide, which is very weather related, just take a moment and think about we're at Thursday already. What kind of a week has it been for you so far? Just use one or two words in the chat. Our half term, yes. Which
Right.
either makes it very challenging or easier, depending. But yes, quiet. Disappointing,
Disappointing.
Sharon. I hope we'll turn that one around for you today. Let's hope that that doesn't continue. Hectic. Yes, well, that's quite a normal theme, I think. And Helen, yeah, adjusting back to coming home from holiday. Yeah, good.
Yeah. I often find that takes a lot longer than I expect. I always think, okay, I'll be back on it the next day, but actually, no, it's good to have a compression day on either side of a holiday.
And David, how's your week been?
Oh, it was going along quite nicely, but last night I had that extreme stress because my laptop died, and I'm thinking like, oh, I'm going to webinar tomorrow. I had a couple of meetings earlier this morning, and it was just one of those, can't believe this is happening. And you're pressing the button and it's just as good as a doornail. And you hold it down and it's still as a doornail. Anyway, it was interesting because I really had to put into practice, take a moment, take a breath, hold our IT guy. And that changed everything because it was like, yeah, this thing happens, here, do this, do that, try this, try that. And over an hour and a half, we got myself completely back up onto our system, which is a backup system of Apple Mac Mini, my iPad, and so my wife's laptop actually. So having that external source, sometimes taking a breath, but then having that external source, because I noticed I couldn't remember any of my passwords. I was beginning to really freak out. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. We're going to be talking about this tomorrow.
So David's been trying to practice what we preach, and
Yes.
equally, I've had quite a challenging week. There is nothing quite like a deadline, and this workshop is always a monthly deadline for us to get our ideas organized, which is really helpful actually for us. But as you're going to see, I've been busy with a lot of product development, which, as ever, is never quite ready until you get the deadline that makes it come together. So, and a big thank you to Mags because she's worked really hard with me on it as well. So let's move on. We mentioned the weather. And so, if your leadership had a weather forecast this week, what would it be? Would it be sunny
Well, I've
here and focus? Yes, David, go on.
got a little poll for that.
Okay, of course.
Yeah. So relaunch poll. Just will clear existing. Continue. There. Can you see that now? Is that
So
showing up?
sunny, yes, it is. Clear,
Yeah.
sunny,
Good.
focused. Mostly steady with some clouds, foggy but pushing through, chaotic and unpredictable. Oh, okay. Full on storm.
Oh,
Got a bit of a spread. You don't like any of them, Helen? You do. You want
well,
another option?
no, the thing is, it depends whether I answer it from one perspective or the other. So I'm going to go for chaotic and unpredictable. And
Right.
if anyone's interested, I can tell you why, but that's.
Okay. Well, I think if you've got anything other than clear, sunny, and focused, or maybe mostly steady, then that's something perhaps to tune into as we go through the content for today and see how perhaps it can help you with some of that less predictable turbulence, if you like. So, what are we going to be doing today? We're going to have a look at the neuroscience of stress and clarity. And talk about some practical tools to shift us from a reactive state to a state of clarity. And then we're going to introduce you to a new product of ours called the Clarity in Crisis Toolkit, which we're going to make available to you for free at the end of the session. And then that also then leads on to another special offer that's only available from within the Clarity in Crisis Toolkit. So we are going to give you some details of how you can access those things at the end. But also we're using them, trying to bring them to life during this session a little bit so that hopefully they'll be helpful to you within this little break at lunchtime during your day. So, tips for dealing with personal stress. Like, we've all done some stress management stuff, and I think a lot of this stuff is quite familiar to us on a personal level. When we get that sense of feeling really, really stressed, what do? We've learned we take a breath, a nice deep inhale and an even longer exhale can just start to bring everything back into focus. And then often it's about, I need to stop worrying about all the stuff that's out there that I can't control and just focus on the things over which I have some control. And then it can be really helpful to prioritize one small action that just takes me forward. What's the first step I can take to just get back into control and get some focus on this? And I think these are, as I say, these are strategies that are pretty familiar to us on a personal level. But if these strategies help us personally, what happens then if we apply them to how we lead others and how we lead our business or our organization? So in order to take us into that zone, I'm going to hand over to David, who's going to talk to you a little bit about the neuroscience of stress and clarity.
Yeah, absolutely. So just get that screen up. Where are we? Zoom there. Yeah, so I mean, some of you may have heard this before, but I actually found, especially in the early days, that having this stuff, being reminded of it again and again, is actually quite important, because in the busyness of everything, and even last night, I needed to remind myself, pause, take a breath, let's have a look and see what's really going on here, rather than just firing off from the different emotions of it all. So let's have a little bit of a look at what's going on in the brain. So here's a nice image of the brain, and this is called the model is called the triadic brain, because it's about three main bits of the brain that you need to be aware of. And the first one is the prefrontal cortex. It's a very thin sheath across the front of our brain. It's only about 2 to 4% of your brain, but yet it uses up 20% of your energy. And it's required for understanding, memorizing, recalling, decision making, which of course is critical in leadership, and inhibiting. And a lot of people forget how important inhibition is in daily life. About urges that you might want to say something, or blurting out something that just because you're angry in response, you say, I'm not going to say that. I'm going to pause, think it through and say, what's the best way for me to communicate? So inhibiting is a huge part of managing your own emotions, managing your own state. So that is all really important, and pretty obvious that it's important. But there's two things that affect it really, really in a huge way. The first is the reward system. I'm not going to give you the technical name for it, but it's the reward system, which is around that part of the brain there you can see, closer to the brainstem. And it's driven by dopamine, because what it is that it's about having a solution focus, which makes you energized and curious about how this is going to work out, how it's going to work well, or what you can do to make it work well, because it's the anticipation of a reward. So last night, my primary focus was to get the backup system working, be able to get back online, be able to have stuff on my screens, and keep focused on that rather than all the things that won't happen if I don't get online. And then the last bit is the amygdala, which is this tiny little bit quite close to the brainstem. It's very reactive, and it's where you have that threat response. So you may have heard of the amygdala, or some people call it an amygdala hijack, where it's the memories of all the threats, all the stuff that's gone wrong in your life ever since you were born. All of those memories, often back in childhood when you didn't have many resources and you just feel, I've got this feeling that something bad is going to happen. Or that life is unfair because your ice cream cone dropped. And then it was like, this is a disaster, and threw a tantrum. And then sometimes when something unfair happens, you go like into a, see about it. It actually relates back to dropping ice cream. And it's not using your adult resources, the resources you have available today. It drops that. It activates adrenaline, you go into fight or flight, and you lose connection with your prefrontal cortex. So in survival mode, with a highly activated amygdala, it actually really wreaks havoc. And you get a very narrow focus, like it's tunnel vision. So I had to keep the big picture in mind last night. Another thing is that it makes you defensive. Like you try to find fault with someone or something and blame something else to make so that you're the innocent victim in all of this, rather than taking ownership of it and going like, hey, how have I contributed to this? Accidental connections. So you'll have a myriad of different things going on in your head, as we always do. But with a highly in survival mode, what happens is that we make accidental connections. So something happens, like let's just say all of you switch off your, happen to at the same time switch off your cameras. I'm going to go, everyone's gone. And I could make it, was it me that said something? It's connecting something that happens randomly with a different kind of meaning. And that can be really, really bad and unhelpful, because the next point is it gives you a pessimistic bias. And that means that everything is always gearing towards something going wrong or something working out in a bad way. And then finally, it means that you've got less cognitive resource, less ability to be able to focus and use your prefrontal cortex. So what we want to do is we want to move into clarity mode. So the clarity mode is really activating your reward system. And the thing is to be able to say, right, let's get solution focused rather than problem focused. And that means that we can then begin to say, okay, what's going on here? What's really happening? And what is it that I want? I'm going to mention this a couple of times throughout today. So the next piece is that it gives you greater cognitive resources. So actually a reward focus makes you more intelligent, gives you more access to your prefrontal cortex and more of the subliminal messages that are coming from the back of your brain or other parts of your brain. So you get more useful insights. You can join the dots more easily. And you've got a wider field of view that makes it possible for you to be able to go, oh, I can see how something over there is happening and something over there, and that they're actually connected. And increased ideas for action. And then finally, fewer perceptual errors. So you can see that this is really the brain state that we want to try and get you into. And what we're going to be sharing with you today is driven towards that.
Thanks, David. So let's consider for a moment the impact of stress on our behavior as a leader. And we're going to illustrate this using a simplified version of some of our Harrison paradoxes, which I think probably all of you on the call have seen in some way or another ahead of today. There are 12 paradoxes that we look at in the Harrison model, but there are 4 in particular that we look at quite closely when we're talking about leading and managing other people. And there's quite a lot going on, but I'm going to put all 4 up here. So the first one is insightful curiosity. And this is where we have the tendency to be certain of our opinion compared with our tendency to be open and receptive to the views of others. And we have a coaching mindset where our tendency to enforce our rules upon others, to hold people accountable for meeting our expectations, balanced with the warmth and empathy to understand why that might be difficult for them and why they might be falling short. Equity mindset then looks at how assertive we are, not in terms of our opinion, but in terms of me looking after myself and making sure that I get what I need in a situation with another person, as opposed to how much I want to be helpful to you in achieving what you need. And then finally, we have respectful candor, which is all about the way in which we communicate with others. So how frank, direct, and forthright we are in our communication, combined with how diplomatic we are, how we are mindful of how that communication is going to make the other person feel. So to have our best possible versatility in using all of those things in a leadership sense, what we really want is to be strong in both of those things. The vertical traits, these red ones, these are our dynamic action traits, and we want to be able to do these things to be really effective. But the horizontal ones, the blue ones, these are our gentle supporting traits. And these are the things that make all of that dynamic action feel a little bit more comfortable for the people that we're leading. So if we're strong on both the vertical and the horizontal traits, then we find ourselves in the top right-hand quadrant. So we get truth exploring, compassionate enforcing, mutual help, win-win, and forthright diplomacy. Would that it were so. More often than not, in our experience, we find that leaders and managers tend towards the bottom right-hand quadrant in each of these. So they tend to prefer that gentle, easier going trait and find it a little harder to do some of that dynamic action trait. Particularly around, and I think enforcing is a really good example. I think very many new managers find it quite hard to be a little bit tougher on people and to hold people accountable. So what tends to happen is that we find that we leaders tend to be somewhat inconclusive and permissive and self-sacrificing and evasive. And that last one means that, I'm not setting clear expectations. I'm not holding people accountable for meeting my expectations. I may be diving back in and picking that up and doing it myself because it's easier than getting the other person to do it. And I might be frustrated, but because I tend to be a little bit evasive, I may not voice that frustration and break the cycle. So this tends to perpetuate. This in itself causes stress as well as all of the other external stress that's going on. But one of the really interesting features about having this sort of bottom right hand quadrant imbalance is that under extreme stress, when we just enough that it kind of flips the pressure release valve, we get a flip to the opposite behavior. So all of a sudden, this inconclusive becomes dogmatic. The warmth and empathy, the permissive, becomes harsh. The self-sacrificing becomes dominated, right? I matter. What about me? And the evasive suddenly becomes blunt in communication. So as a leader or manager, when we're really stressed, this kind of soft, gentle niceness that people are used to builds up and suddenly becomes really quite difficult for people to live with and quite a shock, quite an unusual behavior that people don't expect of us. It's temporary, and given some release of the pressure, we'll slip back into our more gentle traits. But I'm just wondering, go back to some of the things that perhaps you had in mind when you said about your weather forecast this week and what's been going on for you. If things have been a bit stressful, do you recognise perhaps where maybe you've exhibited some unusual behaviours like being dogmatic or harsh or dominating or blunt? David, how did you feel in your stressful situation last night?
Yeah, I was the very first thing actually when my computer crashed, I got really harsh with myself. I started giving myself a, how could you be so stupid? And it's like, what was I doing? It wasn't necessarily my fault, but it was like I made myself, oh no, now I've really messed things up. So I blamed myself first. That was interesting as well. That was the main thing, I think. I thought, oh, wait a second, hold on, just calm down, call the right people. Yeah.
And you managed to not be too blunt with Chris.
Well, exactly. Exactly. Yes. I was actually very pleased that he was so supportive, I must say. At 10 o'clock last night, he
Yeah.
was there for me. It was really good.
So, I mean, that's the thing. When we're in that difficult state, if we've got enough conscious activity going on, we can go, oh, actually, it's not this person's fault. They're here to help me. I need to
Right.
keep a hold of this balanced communication, balanced behavior, because if I flip into all of these flip behaviors, that's not going to serve my purpose. But sometimes it's really hard to actually just keep a lid on it. So what we're seeing is that, this state that we call clarity isn't a single trait. It's a whole combination of behaviors, and what appears will depend on our sort of normal everyday behavior and how subject we are to moving into some of those flips. So clarity, getting back to clarity, it's a state, and you can get back to it if you use some tools that can be helpful. So let me hand you back to David to talk about how to shift from reactivity to clarity.
Yeah, it was really nice. I mean, it was funny how sometimes life presents you with these examples because it was just like so in my face last night. And it was really notice what's happening. And I really noticed like, well, let me ask you, how do you notice in the chat? Just put a couple of words in. How do you notice when you're getting stressed? And then I'll explain what happened to me. Just a couple of words. What is it that you makes you go, uh-oh, I'm being my amygdala is activated, I'm going into fight or flight mode. What are the early warning signs? Just a couple of words in the chat. Task paralysis. Okay, face gets hot. Good. Yeah. Feeling of overwhelm. Absolutely. And that's what I felt, very agitated, panicky, and like wanting to do something, but not knowing what to do and getting very, very agitated and a huge loss of focus. I was like, oh, where do I begin? How do I get this? And the first top passwords I put into my backup system didn't work. So like, oh, great. Now I'm locked out, which created more panic for a while. And definitely, yeah, loss of focus. So it's all about noticing these common cues. So what is it that I'm doing to make myself aware so I can begin to inhibit some of that and then create a reset window? Take 3 deep breaths. And ideally, in through your nose, nice and deep, and then relax on the out breath to take an intentional pause. And if possible, or if appropriate, go for a walk. If you can in nature, that's a really good thing to do. But the idea is that even in an intense meeting, just say, like, okay, I need to think this through for a moment. And just allow yourself to breathe a bit. Because just that breathing helps metabolize a lot of the adrenaline in your body. So you begin to absorb it and it's less activating. And then ask a clarity question. Ask yourself a question that's going to help you focus on what it is that's most important. So what's my job as a leader, for example? Or what outcome matters most here? What's the most important thing right now? So last night for me was just getting the system back up and running so I could access my stuff, all the stuff that we have and all the things that we were trying to do. And then what can I influence today? And there was part of it actually was I can't influence my laptop. I'm pressing buttons on my laptop. It is just not responding. And Chris at the end of the day said, well, try it again first thing in the morning, which I did. And it worked. So overnight, somehow it had cooled down, managed to reset itself. And I was getting ready to go. I'd even looked where the local IT support shop is. I thought, no, I'll just click it and see. And it worked. I felt like, but at least I had myself back up and running, so I was able to get a good night's sleep. So that was also an important part of getting that immediate support from Chris was really important for my mental well-being. So that's all on that one.
Yeah. Okay. So what we've done is we've taken some of this understanding about how we as individuals, and particularly in a leadership context, manage ourselves and our own stress and deal with that stressful environment. But also we're really feeling that the external environment currently is quite challenging. Some organizations, some businesses feeling it more sharply, more keenly than others. But there's very much a bit of a sense of raised levels of stress, of challenging economic, financial, business times, and lots of leaders really getting that sense of overwhelm on a business level as well as a personal level. So we thought that we would try to give you something perhaps to help with that situation. And that led to us developing our Clarity in Crisis Toolkit. So a little overview of what that gives us. It's using these same principles that we use to manage ourselves. And it includes a clarity checkpoint diagnostic. So there's a quick diagnostic to help you to prioritize where you need to focus your attention in a business sense. It includes a 60-minute strategic clarity session with me or with David to talk through those results, to just kind of take the opportunity to offload a little bit, whatever that session is time for you. And a package of resources that we've put together to help you to look at, to take stock, to take a breath in a business sense, and to decide on how to move forwards. So a pack of resources. So let's talk a little bit about those three things. The Clarity Checkpoint Diagnostic takes less than 10 minutes. It gives you an immediate picture of strengths, risks, and what you need to be focusing on straight away. And once you've completed it, you'll get your own personal clarity score, a breakdown of your results, and some suggestions on which of the toolkit resources will be most helpful for your situation. So you can dive in to the bits that are most helpful for you. David.
Right. Yeah. So the next bit is the strategic clarity session. And that's really about being able to have a one-to-one with us, either Ali or myself. And it's about unpacking your results to say, like, what did you find from that? What insights did you gain from doing that initial diagnostic? Prioritize what matters and decide on the next move. And it's a bit like last night. Again, I was able to move forward with confidence and address especially the issues around passwords to overcome my stress and overcome that fear and just go, okay, let's do this one. Let's be methodical here. Let's be very pragmatic, take one step at a time and get through this. It's completely confidential. Oh, no, that's fine. And it's a facilitated open conversation. So we want to be able to help you look at the truth of the matter. And that means that there may be ugly things to look at, and then it's about looking at them. But looking at them with like a safe pair of hands to be able to go, yes, and there's always something you can do about this. So there's no sales pitch in this. It's just a calm, focused space to think clearly. And we'll guide you through the toolkit to be able to help you see step by step what's the most pertinent stuff for you, the most salient stuff for you to say, okay, this is what I need to do first.
So, David, carry on.
Yep, that's pretty much it.
So, how's the toolkit structured? We've got a variety of resources. So each section has a checklist, a tip sheet, and a download with a walkthrough guide telling you how to use that particular download. And the download varies depending on the topic. And the topics covered are these. So it's about getting your mindset right in the first place to help you to be clear, looking at how you're showing up as a leader, and then at fairly high level, a sort of a health check, if you like, from a business sense. What are the important things in terms of finance, marketing, operations, and how we manage people? So we've just got a few little sort of vignettes, a few little stories to help bring some of this to life. And the first one is Julia. So Julia is the CEO of a 150-person employee-owned consultancy. She's experiencing shifting client demands, political uncertainty, internal team fatigue, and she found herself snapping at people when they asked questions, feeling distracted in meetings, and really struggling to prioritize her time. And after one particularly difficult afternoon, she sat down with the toolkit and she dived into the mindset section. And the first thing that caught her eye was the mindset tip sheet. She recognized herself instantly to be in that survival mode pattern. Reactivity, urgency, narrow focus on the things that were going wrong. And she used the checklist to spot exactly where her leadership habits were starting to slip. So she was having fewer pauses between meetings, more reactive email correspondence, and she'd lost her morning focus routine. So the next morning she used the daily reset journal before opening her inbox, and it took her 5 minutes, but it helped her name her current state, identify what was influencing it, and reconnecting with her intention for the day, which was to be steady and not scattered. That led to her feeling more in control during the day. She was able to pause before reacting. She asked better questions. She ended the day with a short reflection on what helped her stay grounded and what she'd carry forward tomorrow. And over the next week, she used that journal 3 times and shared the tip sheet with her leadership team. to model the behavior that she wanted to see. Very important aspect of leadership. So the key learning point there is that clarity isn't about eliminating pressure. It's about interrupting that stress loop and choosing how to respond, which requires that pause. And the toolkit helped her to lead from intention, not overload. David.
Yeah, so another good example is Tom. He's the managing director of a 100-person employee-owned engineering consultancy. And over recent months, he'd noticed an undercurrent of confusion and strain among his senior team. Some of you may be familiar with that. Where priorities seemed to shift weekly despite working long hours, progress felt slow, people seemed to be unfocused. So after a particularly challenging board review, Tom took a step back, opened the leadership section of the Clarity and Crisis Toolkit, and looked at the leadership tip sheet. And it immediately resonated with him because he said, yeah, that's something that I could use right away. Especially the first practice, which is called anchor the team around what matters most. And he realized that he hadn't actually clearly communicated the 1 to 3 really non-negotiable priorities for the quarter. And that each director had subtly drifted into their own version of what good looks like for them. So he booked out 2 hours using the leadership clarity map to clarify the business strategic priorities, current pressures disrupting people's focus, and the conversations that are needed to bring the team into alignment. So the same week, he used the Leadership Reset Journal, which is also available in the toolkit for you, with prompts and guides to help his own thinking before the meeting. And one question stood out in that, which was, what would I need to stay grounded, clear, and effective? That really made him think for a moment to slow down. He recognized he needed to speak more clearly, and above all, to listen more. So the result was a focused, energized meeting that surfaced some key tensions within the team, clarified expectations, and gave the team a shared direction. And afterwards, Tom felt lighter and more like the leader that he believed his business needed. So again, the key point is clarity isn't just strategic. It's actually a very personal thing. If we're not clear in ourselves, how can we be clear for our business? The toolkit helped Tom lead with steadiness and realign his team without overcomplicating the process. We're not asking you to have to read leadership books. We've taken the essence of things just for you and put them into the shortest, most concise format we could develop.
Thanks. So people on this call, you know us pretty well, and you know that our focus is primarily on the people side of the business, but it does start with the strategic view of what is it that we're trying to achieve and what's important to us right now. And that's why we've included a section in the toolkit on finance, and a section on marketing, and a section on operations. And I think I want to give you one example here of the financial focus, and then David will pick up with the people focus. And I'm looking at the time, so we'll not spend too long on the marketing and operations. But I just want to give you a sense of how this works from our perspective. So to give you the example of Sophie, so she's a finance director of a 90-person consultancy, and she's struggling with rising costs, hesitant clients, and political uncertainty, leaving the whole leadership team really wondering what was going to happen with the business. And I think probably lots of us are experiencing right now. This is feeling almost as difficult and as uncertain and rapidly changing as perhaps during the pandemic even. So from a finance director's perspective, that's really quite challenging. Conversations about cash flow become front and center and very reactive. It's very hard to take a strategic view. So strategy meetings are being hijacked by worries about margins and pipeline volatility. Sophie realized that she needed more than better spreadsheets. They needed better focus. So she used the toolkit and the strategic finance snapshot to frame the next board session. And in under 30 minutes, she outlined the current cash and margin position, the pressure points affecting performance and decision-making, and the 3 financial priorities that would have the biggest impact over the next 90 days. She paired that with prompts from the finance tip sheet, especially what decision does this number help us make? What cash decision are we deferring due to a lack of clarity? And the result was a conversation that moved from fear to focus. Instead of fixating on what they couldn't control, the team aligned around renegotiating supplier terms, rethinking pricing on low margin services, and accelerating overdue receivables, so getting the money in quicker. And that's led to a sort of monthly finance checklist that Sophie now uses with her MD to stay proactive. So the key learning point here is that financial leadership isn't about reporting the past, it's about shaping what happens next. And the toolkit helps Sophie turn uncertainty into clarity and clarity into action. David, I'm going to skip through a couple.
Yeah, you do that. So we're talking about Rachel reconnecting the team through honest conversations. Rachel was a head of people for a 200-person professional services firm. And while the senior team had been focused on financial resilience and client delivery, she began to notice the signs of a disconnect, especially across departments. Missed handovers, low morale, and I think a lot of people are reporting on this at the moment, rising uncertainty amongst line managers. There's some interesting data about how line managers are amongst the most disengaged at the moment. And so she raised it at a leadership meeting and said, our people don't just need updates. They were getting plenty of information, but really it's about they need direction, connection, and a chance to talk. So Rachel opened the Clarity and Crisis Toolkit and used the people tip sheet and the mini guide to frame her approach. And the key shift was moving from communication to conversation. And I really like the way that that's framed, in that it's not just talking at people, it's really listening to where they're coming from as well. What did they have to say? What is it that makes it a two-way conversation? She equipped line managers with a team conversation framework and asked them to use it in team meetings, one-to-ones, and use the 6 prompts that helped the team name what was going well, what felt stuck, and where they needed clarity or support. Within a fortnight, Rachel saw a shift. Leaders were surfacing issues earlier, which is always a good sign. It might be uncomfortable, but at least it's a good sign that issues are being raised. Team members were clearer on current priorities, and trust began to rebuild after months of just getting through all that slog and hard graft, and everybody saying how busy they are. They began to have more meaningful conversations. And one team leader reported, I thought we were fine, but once we actually opened up the space, I realized how many people were holding back. And that's a key thing that we always emphasize in communication. Allow the stuff to come to the surface, because then it can be dealt with. So the key learning point for Rachel really was that, people don't just need reassurance. They need relevance, honesty, and a sense of structure that will help and guide communication and help it flow. So the toolkit really helped her rehumanize leadership and bring clarity to the team experience.
Good. So, just a point of reflection, we've been talking at you quite a lot. So an opportunity for you to just take stock of how that's landed with you. And I wonder if you'd like to perhaps share your thoughts in the reflections in the chat. In terms of, does any of that particularly resonate with your own situation? Or does it help you to perhaps highlight which aspect we've talked about, whether it's mindset, leadership, finance, marketing, operations, people? Which would be the starting point for you? Where do you feel where are you feeling the pain most? And what most needs your attention in your business right now? Any thoughts in the chat? Or by all means, open your mic and speak.
I'd suggest most of those seem to be a problem at the moment, particularly in light of the political and economic situation. It's very interesting. I think the way there are certain common themes there in terms of stronger engagement, raising issues, being open with people, and so on. And I think those are extremely valuable. From my perspective, I would like to see the toolkit and understand more about it, because I think that's perhaps the key to enabling us to see how important and which of these to prioritise.
Well, Your wish is my command, Gary.
Very good of you.
So all of the little stories that we've painted and the ones that we haven't shared with you are all in a little download PDF that Mags is going to pop into the chat for you to download. And if you'd like to access the toolkit, which we very much hope that you will, there's a QR code there that you can use straight away. It's absolutely free. It's just there for you to dive into and dig around and use in whatever way is helpful. Feel free to share it with others. And Mags has put the link in the chat to the landing page where that QR code will take you as well. So you've got two choices. You can use the QR code or you can use the link that's in the chat. And there's the PDF ready to download, which just tells you a little bit more about it.
And we're really looking, just to mention, we're really looking forward to your feedback on it, right? Because this is about, we've designed it for you, and we'd love to hear how you're finding it, what's useful about it, and how it's helping you.
And don't forget that if you go onto the toolkit, it will talk you through how to do your little diagnostic checkpoint, clarity checkpoint, first of all, which might give you a clue as to where to start. And again, we're offering you that completely free 60-minute call with either me or David, and you can book that through the Clarity and Crisis Toolkit program, which is on our T4P Academy. So it will just walk you through all of those steps. To make sure that you aren't required to pay, there is a discount code which is called Clarity 100. So when you go to that landing page, it'll look a bit like this, and you'll see here it's normally £540. We've got a Clarity 100 discount code. So all you need to do is enter the coupon code at the checkout, complete the checkpoint diagnostic, book your strategic clarity session, and then unlock all of your toolkit resources. And you can just get the toolkit by clicking on this button here. Okay. And just to give you another little sense of the value that's in there, you'll find in one of the lessons in the toolkit a special offer, which is actually our Clarity Coaching Program. So you can use the toolkit absolutely for free with that coupon code. But then if you choose to do some more coaching with us, you can access a series of 5 60-minute sessions with me or with David with a load of bonus content. So we're going to run monthly group clarity sessions. So a little bit like this, a live session, come along, talk about where you're at, learn from each other. And sort of perhaps focus on something that's very front of mind on the day. We're also going to give you access to the brain-friendly time management course, which I know some of you on this call have done. And if you've done it and you found it useful, perhaps you might like to pop a little note in the chat by way of endorsement. That would be lovely. David's marvelous Simple Delegation ebook is a download that you can access from the coaching program. And our entire T4P resource library, where we curate lots and lots of different resources from here, there and everywhere, all under topic headings. So there's a really useful bundle of resources there. And the total value of that is £2,552. And we're going to give you that for just £975 plus VAT. And you will find the discount code, the coupon code, on the landing page. If you go into the toolkit, it will take you to the landing page for this offer. And if you want something further, I know some of you, as I say, we looked at the paradoxes earlier, the Harrison paradoxes. The Clarity Plus program is all of everything that's in the Clarity Coaching program, plus your core reports from the Harrison system, traits and definitions, paradox mastery, engagement and employment expectations report, and a 90-minute Harrison debrief. So it's the coaching program plus the whole Harrison report pack and debrief. And that has total value of £3,234, and for you just 1316, but only through this route. So your first step is very much go to the toolkit, have a browse around. You'll find the link in there to move you through to the other things if they're of any interest to you. So I'm going to stop sharing. That's the end of our slides for now. Slightly different format to our session today, but we found, times are tricky and we wanted to do something and offer something really practical that would be helpful to you. So we really hope that you'll find the toolkit helpful. Do take us up on that 60-minute call. There's absolutely no obligation for anything else. Just trying to be helpful, really.
Yeah,
Dan.
it looks okay. Just to say, it looks like a couple of people can't download the Clarity and Crisis Toolkit. We'll email it to you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I can't. It's not coming up.
All
for
right.
me.
We'll follow up with an email with the PDF download and the link to the landing page as well. So no problem. Dan.
It's very, very generous of you, Ali. Thank you for your discounted versions. Really, we can obviously vouch. Trident have used some of these toolkits, and they've been really, really helpful to us. I just wanted to ask David. You made an interesting comment about live managers at the moment being some of the most. Did you say disengaged group?
We've seen some research that are showing that a lot of line managers are struggling because they're getting the brunt of, oh, people aren't engaged. But then they're going like, yeah, but I'm not getting the support that I need in order to engage my people. I'm not getting the clarity of what's really what are the strategic priorities. So that they're very much crushed in the middle. They're getting all the complaints from their people and they're getting a lot of pressure from above. So they're very much that squeezed middle. And I think a lot of people underestimate the pressure on those middle managers. Because they're also being expected to do their own job, right? Their own full-time job, plus all the management of all their people. And they need more support and tips and techniques on how to do that and what to do with that.
Yeah, interesting.
Quite some while back, I was working on a big project in Russia, and we had a similar thing going on where the leadership were putting enormous pressure downwards. And the workers were pushing upwards, and we actually called it the frozen middle, because what happened to that middle management layer was that they just went round and round in circles, and they felt completely paralyzed. So it's worth bearing in mind, as I found at the time, that you need to talk to both ends, not just one end.
Yeah.
It's the top and the bottom that you need to have conversations with.
Yeah, there's a very interesting parallel there. I was at part of a seminar about a week or so ago when we were discussing real estate industry. One of the biggest issues seemed to be that you've got an aging demographic who effectively are retiring as early as they can do, and certainly not interested in new business development. You've got a younger demographic coming into the profession who are about 5 years undeveloped in relation to their previous cohorts, because effectively they can't pick up phones and talk to people and so on. So the squeeze middle effectively are having to do the work and try and develop the business. They can't do both. Yeah. So there's a real issue in real estate generally in terms of generating business and keeping the relationship-driven nature of that industry alive.
Wow. Yeah, that's really, really fascinating. Because also what we're getting is the pandemic cohorts who've had the disaster of the pandemic during a very formative years of school and early university. No idea what that would do to their mental health, quite honestly, around that whole fragmentation of society in a way that, we didn't have to think about. I'm saying we, I mean, I'm a little bit older, so.
I can just see in the chat, I think Mags has produced a compressed version of the PDF that you might have more luck with that. So do please give that a go, but we will email it to you also. Good.
Okay, well, I'm aware of the recording, so I think what we'll do is we'll just end the recording now and wrap that up for anybody. And anybody listening to the recording, if you have any questions about anything, don't hesitate to get in touch. And we'll be happy to talk to you about any aspect of the toolkit. Thanks. And thanks everyone for participating, and thanks for your ongoing engagement with this.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
so much
you.
for the
Very good.
resources.
Thank you very much. Thank
Really
you.
appreciated.
Mm.
Very welcome, Diana.